In August of 1962, during Amazing Fantasy number 15, Marvel will introduce a character who will become someone that teenagers can identify with, in addition to changing the archetype of teenagers in the comic book universe. He will become one of the most popular superheroes of all time and rise to the position of Marvel's flagship character. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man.
I just wanna get loose when the beat drops.
So, one of the most common questions that I hear with regards to Spider-Man is, why was he so popular? Because Spider-Man sucks. And just in terms of his powers, he is not that strong of a character. And in truth, you're right. I mean, if you're one of these guys who argues that Spider-Man is very weak compared to most everybody else in the Marvel Universe, you're 100% right. I mean, you've got the Incredible Hulk, whose physical strength is virtually limitless. There's no end to how strong he can get. You've got the Sentry. His molecules move an instant ahead of the current time stream, and he has virtually every superhuman power ever. And then you got Spider-Man, who can climb up walls and shoot webbing out of his wrists. I mean, he's just not that strong. You're 100% right. But the one thing to bear in mind is that just because a character is strong does not mean they're going to be popular. For example, if I asked you, who's Polaris? A large number of people who may watch this video in the future won't know who Polaris is. There's no reason for them to. Polaris has never been introduced to the Marvel multimedia universe. I mean, with the exception of season 5, I think, of X-Men the Animated Series, I mean, she's never been in a movie. She's never even been discussed in a movie. And so a lot of people just don't know who she is. Polaris was a character who had basically the exact same powers as Magneto. She could manipulate the entire electromagnetic spectrum, albeit maybe not necessarily as powerful as Magneto, but she was still a formidable person. And she's much stronger than Spider-Man was. So when it comes to the popularity of characters, it's not just about their powers, it's about the legacy that they create for themselves, and that they create for the comic book industry as a whole. With Spider-Man, he came along at a time when teenagers were largely considered to either be sidekicks, or they just were bystanders in the Marvel Universe. They were never a main show. They were never on the main stage. Take, for example, DC Comics. The most popular superhero duo of all time, sidekick and main star, was Batman and Robin. Everybody knows who Batman and Robin is. There's probably not a soul on the planet who doesn't know who they are. I could walk into a hole in Arizona somewhere, stick my head in there and ask people, have you ever heard of Batman and Robin? And chances are they'll say yes. They'll know exactly who they are because they were so popular. But Robin, again, was a sidekick. And even if you go back and watch the old Adam West Batman TV show, Robin was a walking joke. I mean, nobody ever took him seriously. He'd throw out these stupid little one-liners, holy no hair, Batman, stuff like that. Like, no one ever took Robin seriously. Spider-Man was a teenager who just came onto the scene and was the main show. He was the main star, the main part of the attraction, and teenagers immediately bonded to that. And there were a couple reasons why. One, being a teenager in general, you feel like nobody ever takes you seriously. That's just kind of the way it is with being a teenager. And the reason for that is because as a teenager, you just don't know everything. I mean, there are adults who don't know everything, but there are more adults who know more than you do. But the fact remains that teenagers just didn't believe that anyone took them seriously. At the same time, they could look at Peter Parker before he was bit by a radioactive spider, and Peter Parker was them. Peter Parker was the kid who was being beat up in school. He was the guy who could never get the girl. He was the nerd, the one that no one ever took seriously. And then suddenly, Peter Parker's bit by a radioactive spider, and he is, bam, he's awesome. He's getting the girls. Flash Thompson's not bullying him anymore. He's the cool kid. And so a lot of teenagers could really kind of dive into the world of Spider-Man. They could be completely absorbed by the world of Spider-Man because it was their escape from the life in which they lived. And I think it was more so with Spider-Man than it was with adult superheroes, with, even adult superheroes like Captain America, who had sidekicks, Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, Nick Fury and Dum Dum, what was his name? Dum Dum Dugan, I think was his name. He was a pretty formidable guy, but nonetheless, you had these adults who were really powerful, but teenagers usually can't identify with adults. At the same time, you also got to keep in mind that Spider-Man was not fighting pushovers in his prime. I mean, during his time, when he was really kind of at the peak, In the Marvel Universe, he wasn't fighting weak guys. He wasn't just slinging around with his webs, beating up bank robbers and muggers and stuff like that. I mean, he was fighting big-time villains. For example, Carnage, probably the most formidable villain that Spider-Man has ever fought. Carnage was the result of the Venom symbiote having an offspring. And of course, because the Venom symbiote had taken some of the powers of Spider-Man when Venom and Spider-Man were a single character, when it gave birth, so to speak, to the Carnage symbiote had some of Spider-Man's powers. So when the Carnage symbiote bonded with with Cletus Cassidy, you had this psychopathic killer who had bonded to a symbiote, which in turn granted him already powerful abilities, who in turn also had some of the powers of Spider-Man. And so Carnage was extremely durable. He was extremely powerful. He was able to go toe-to-toe with both Spider-Man and Venom at the same time and overpower them both. It took quite a while for both Spider-Man and Venom to finally take over or to defeat Carnage, and they actually ended up defeating him by using some sort of sound resonance device or something along those lines. But nonetheless, Carnage was a very formidable opponent. I would go as far as to say that Carnage against quite a few opponents in the Marvel Universe would probably come out on top. In addition, Spider-Man was one of the Avengers. I mean, the Avengers don't induct people for the sake of posterity. They don't induct people just because they're interesting or because they're fascinating or because they might help the group look good. They induct them in there because they're one of the mightiest heroes. And that, I think, is one of the single greatest aspects of Peter Parker. Peter Parker never gives up. It doesn't matter how bad it gets. It doesn't matter how many people are falling to the white side and are absolutely getting demolished. Peter Parker will throw that webbing into a wall and go slinging in there with everybody else. And that's one of the reasons why he's such a cool guy. At the same time, he also has a pretty formidable intellect. He's extremely smart, especially only being a teenager. And so there are a lot of people who I guess kind of group together with Peter Parker in order to figure out major issues. For example, Reed Richards and Peter Parker get together on occasion with regards to issues on genetics and various forms of science. Beast and Peter Parker team up to engage in different tasks to try to figure out some kind of a problem or to develop some sort of new device or something along those lines. I mean, it's not uncommon to see Peter Parker group in with other superhero teams in order to achieve a particular goal. So just bear in mind, when it comes to superheroes and their popularity, it's not just based on their physical power. It's also based on the legacy that they create and what it is that they've contributed to the Marvel Universe. So with that being said, I'm going to bring this video to an end, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.